Good afternoon and welcome to State of Sponge 9. It is March of 2016. Speaking right now is Jeeden. I am one of the leaders of the Sponge Project, and we got a whole bunch of stuff we're going to be going over today. I'm just going to go around and do some shout outs to some people that we've got with us today, and I'm going to start from the top of the list. First one we have is Doctor, who is the CFO and the CTO. He's the one that has all the initials of the project.
Hello.
We have Gavizo with us, who is a fellow Sponge leader and kind of like my partner in crime.
Hi.
We have Mumphrey with us, who is handling all the audio and such of the stream.
Top of the morning to you.
We have Owen with us, who takes care of the community and does outreach.
G'day, folks.
Got Aaron here with us, who works on the implementation and the API.
Hello.
We got Awesome Man 1234, who is doing the docs now. No, I'm not sure if he's going to be speaking. We got Gravity Fox with us, who is...
Hello.
Oh, yeah, there he is. We got Gravity Fox with us, who is a contributor. We got Hassan with us, who does essential commands from the forums, also a contributor.
Hello.
Got Client Hacks with us, who is a contributor and does a variety of plugins.
Hi.
Got Inscrutable with us, who leads the Sponge docs.
Greetings from Whoop Whoop.
We got Joe Schmo here with us, who helps the State of Sponge community server.
Hello.
Got Luke GB with us, who handles sys ops and kind of the back end. He's behind the scenes.
Hello.
Got ME4502, who, as many of you know, does gosh, I am drawing a blank right now. Craftbook, there we go. As well as one of the developers on the Sponge project.
Hi.
Got Minecraft with us, though his microphone's muted, but he works on the implementation as well as the API. Got Simon with us, who also does the same thing.
Hey.
And we have our newest addition to the team, which is Wendy, who joined us, 2 weeks ago now, I believe? And, yep, there he is. And
Hello.
basically just, he worked with me on the old Spout project, and he came back, and I immediately pulled him in and put him to work. And last but not least, we have TZK, who works on the docs, along with like Awesome Man and Inscrutable. And to round it all up, we have a group of fellows from Resident Hosts who are going to be hanging out with us during the conference today, and we're going to hear a little bit more about them as we go through the conference. So, with that out of the way, let's get right into things. First and foremost, let's do a shout out to the sponsors as well. And do you want to go ahead and do so, Owen? I'll let you do that.
Okay then. Well, shout out to our new sponsors, BeastNode and Bycraft, as well as our existing sponsors, Multiplay, Creeper Host, MC Pro Hosting, Nitrous Networks. I think that's about it. They've all been great at helping us with the sort of stuff from servers to getting us ready for all sorts of activities, including last year's Minecon. But yeah, big thanks to all those guys for helping out.
Absolutely. Thanks to you guys so very much. And if you are someone who's with us today and you do want to look into potential sponsorship opportunities with us, be sure to ping Doctor on the IRC. You can also reach donations at spongefoundation.com for more information, and he'll be more than happy to work with you or let you know how you can help us out. So moving on, let's look into the API updates, starting with the 3.1 release that we're going to do and looking forward to 4.0 release. So starting out 3.1, as you know, for a while, the API has been at 3.1 snapshot, which basically means we've been doing features. Well, I mean, not really features, but been doing fixes and such to it in preparation to getting 3.1 out the door. 3.1 took a lot longer, not only pretty much because we ended up just breaking things as people found some stuff that needed to be changed in the API. And so it's pretty much just represented the kind of the stable part of the API, and it has been for a while. We're going to go ahead and release 3.1 and just, it's going to be released. It doesn't going to have any more features. And if there's any bug fixes to be made, they may be backported into it. The biggest one, though, is the 4.0 release. Now, we released Sponge Forge, and for the most part, we released Sponge Vanilla to beta status by the end of 2015. Since that point, we've added a bunch of stuff, and the list is just daunting, and we're going to try and go through it all without taking forever today to do so, since we released it to kind of go into what we are doing with this new API release. We're going to have some people talk today about some things that they've added and kind of go into that a little bit. I'm going to be passing the mic around a bit so they can talk about some of the parts they contributed. Do we have any rough numbers of about how much we've actually added in 4.0? Gabe, do you know?
Best ways to actually just look at the change, the comparison between bleeding and master.
Yeah, very much so. I know it is pretty substantial.
Let's see. Comparing it right off the bat, on GitHub. There's about 87 commits, but files changed total is 6,527 additions and 1,790 deletions.
Gotcha. And that's just the API in itself. The implementation is generally a bit larger as far as the changes and such that have been made. But I figured we'll go ahead and start from the top, and we'll go down through the couple things we've done. The first one up is the new data format API, and I'm going to turn that over to Gabizo to discuss a bit.
So data format, if some people are maybe familiar, I initially wrote the original persistence API for Sponge somewhere around December of 2014. And unfortunately, it kind of just sat there laying to waste as it never got added to, except with the additions to data view and data containers and data serializables. The data format, what it adds is the ability to provide an input stream and an output stream to serialize and deserialize data containers and data serializables thereof. So right off the bat, the supported formats are actually going to be JSON through configurate and NBT for the first time. Will be natively supported in the API. I'm sure that there might be some bugs, but we will swiftly iron those out as they are being used. And I turn next to Profile Property API for Aaron.
Okay, so a lot of these changes were made by Kashik, who you may have seen on GitHub, but since he isn't here, I will be talking about some of them. So, some of you who have been following Sponge on GitHub may have seen a PR called Contextual Data. Now, it's not quite done yet, but once it's finished, what it's going to allow plugin devs to do is set things for a specific player's viewer. So, to this effect, display name data has been changed so that the actual display name and whether it's visible are split up. So for now, this doesn't mean very much to plugins, but eventually, this will allow you to do something like make my name invisible for one person and visible for another, or even completely different for another person.
And moving on a little bit from there, let's take a look at, actually, Aaron, we'll have you talk about the profile property API as well, too.
Okay, that's another thing of Kashyyyks. So previously, the tab list API was, profile properties in general was pretty limited. So all you could really do was get the name and UUID of a profile, which you could get through the Game Profile Manager. However, now you're able to completely control the profile properties. So in terms of a plugin, what this means is that you can set a custom texture on a profile. So if you, say, have an old skin that you'd want to display on a human or in the tab list or somewhere, you can set that yourself manually without it being an actual player's skin, which is what you had to do previously.
And I'm going to just turn it to Windy for pitch modulations.
Okay, so with pitch and yaw, you can now basically there was a bug previously that was stopping rotational updates from happening. So that's
Oh,
fixed.
wait a second. Not for the head rotations, but for the pitch modulation.
Oh, my mistake. Okay. Essentially, that's just a little helper that you can pass this constant value to the play sound method, which will modulate the pitch to a certain note. So with particle effects with notes, you can just specify, I think it's a value between 0 and 24 and spans 2 octaves. But you don't really have this with sound effects. You just have the one note effect. So to modulate the pitch on the sound effects, you apply a double constant, and now there's just a little helper class that can help you modulate pitches to specific notes.
All right, that sounds... Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, which also spans 2 octaves, the same as the note blocks.
All right, then, gotcha. And I think that was wasn't that the first PR you submitted to us? I think that was.
That is.
Yeah.
Yep, that was the first one that you put in. And moving on from there, let's talk about some of the changes to inventory opening and closing, Aaron.
So as Jaden said, this just affects opening and closing inventories. So the inventory, API, which is written by Mumphrey, is still the same. This just has to do with when you want to display something like a chest or a furnace or something to a player. So now opening inventories is player only. Previously, you could do that from humans, but that didn't really make sense as there's no client attached, so you can't really display any kind of GUI to them. Additionally, you now have to pass in a cause when opening or closing an inventory. For those of you who aren't familiar with cause, this essentially is just an extra or contextual information about an event. So for a block break event, this might contain the player who broke the block, the location they were standing, what they were holding, or just other kinds of contextual information. So in the future, once opening and closing inventories are properly implemented, plugins will be able to find out more information about the plugin that actually opened an inventory when listening to an event.
Thank you for that, Aaron. The next change is head rotations. That was something Windy added as well.
Yep, so now it just exposes a new method to the living entity, which is just set head rotation. It works pretty similar to body rotation. I think -90 is straight up, 90 is down, and then the yaw works on a 360 axis. You can also use, there's a new method, look at, in living, so you can just pass a vector into that, and the entity will look at the specified location.
Thank you for that. And the next change is adding chat type to message channels. Considering you've worked with text the most, Wendy, I think you're the proper person to get in some information on that.
Okay. I haven't looked at it too much, but if I'm not mistaken, I think chat type refers to like the no, that's chat visibility. You know, I gotta check. I'm not actually 100% sure.
From what if I remember correctly, the chat type added to message channels was mainly considering that a message channel event could be displayed for all players if you wanted to send a title, for example, or an item title, or just general chat, or some boss bar, I believe. I'm not 100% sure, but I think that's what it was touching on.
I believe, actually, that's something different. Titles are something different entirely. I think, yeah, I was actually right the first time. Chat types are basically the type of visibility it has on the client.
Oh, okay. I stand corrected. So there was that change added. The targeted location data now uses a vector 3D. So, because previously it was using a location, this is just a minor sanity change because you can't have an Ender Pearl targeting a location in a different world. That would be just nonsense. The populate chunk event post no longer includes transactions for changing out what blocks have been changed. This is mostly because WorldGen API already allows you to make those types of modifications without listening to an event, which is quite slow. And from our testing, we've already seen that world generation has sped up by about half when you have quite a few 100,000 blocks being generated every tick. Another change has been we've moved away from listenable feature from Guava to completable feature, something native to Java 8. We've added a new plugin annotation processor for file metadata generation to generate an MC mod info, essentially for plugins. I don't know if Chris or Adam wants to add anything to it.
Well, the biggest thing was we needed some kind of plugin metadata that existed outside of the Java class files. And this is really important for services that will do something with a plugin. And the biggest example would be like OR, where OR takes a plugin being uploaded and needed to be able to read that information to know what it is and what to do with it. But one of my conditions that I put forth on this system was if you wanted to just have one Java file plugin that does something very simple, you shouldn't have to spend all this time, creating that mod file, updating the mod file. If you want to do everything in the plugin, you should be able to. And that was the objective that was completed with this system. Is basically a plugin is just a Gradle file that tells it how to build, and a Java file that actually runs the script code. And there's really nothing else to it. That's as simple as it can be if you desire it to be so. Otherwise, that system is going to be in 4.0, and there's really not much else to put about it. It's just a system to generate the metadata which we need. We hope services that decide to do things with Sponge plugins will really enjoy it. So we can carry on from there.
Up next is Windy with the text templating API that he's added in both 3.1 but made minor breaking changes in 4.0.
So essentially, text templates are just an easy way to store messages that plugins may want to use. For instance, you might want to have a message that welcomes a player to the server when they've joined for the first time. So you can define a text template that can be serialized to a configuration file that will have placeholders in it for the player, maybe the server name, and then within your plugin, you would actually pass parameters to this text template, and the text template will apply your parameters and send the message to the player. So this can be really useful for when you, like, how do I put this? If you
I think it's for formatting. It's probably the best way to put it.
Is probably the best way to put it. So that's pretty self-explanatory. And in the breaking changes in 4.0 is basically there, instead of passing a text object as the message in message events, now internally it uses a mutable formatter. So this allows plugins to add prefixes or suffixes or change the body in like a modular fashion that can be more interactable between plugins. So say chat plugin 1 adds a prefix and chat plugin 2 doesn't know that this plugin has added prefixes, but it doesn't want to override any prefixes that may have been applied already. So it can just add it to the end of the header section in the message, and then it'll pass along. And internally, the formatter doesn't apply any of these parameters until the event is finished. So if one plugin adds a group tag and sets the parameter, or even doesn't set the parameter, plugin 2 can grab that group tag and set the parameter of it without actually messing with the text itself.
Also, I believe that you've added the ability for text to finally be data serializable. Is that correct?
Yep, that is correct.
Excellent.
Which is an awesome change that I'm going to use myself in a backpack plugin that exists under Almira Def. It does a very weird system right now to put that text into a SQL database because it does go to the data container first. But now that the text is data serializable, it can just be put there. No changes or no other further weird changes needed.
Yeah, you can also, it's worth mentioning, I think, you can also serialize text objects directly to configuration files.
Oh yeah, that's true too. And that's a really big change that we made.
Also, you've made changes to the message event and bleeding for text templates, correct?
Right, that's what I was talking about with the messages, how we pass around a formatter now instead of just a text object. So the formatter just basically allows you to transform the message without
without hard coding it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Okay. On to the next change is respawn location data now has a new respawn location object. It defines the world UUID, the position, and a Boolean flag for whether the spawn position is exactly forced. This is where Minecraft will have a respawn location for a player, but if it is not forced, then it will attempt to find a quote-unquote safe area to respawn the player at. So if there's a block blocking the player, or if there's something in the way, they will be moved. Up next is the tab list API changes. I believe Aaron has merged that in from Kashik.
That's correct. So this sort of goes with Kashik's earlier changes to the profile properties, which I talked about. So the tab list API essentially allows you to modify the in-game list of players that you see when you hold down the tab key. So thanks to the profile property changes, you're able to add and remove completely fake entries from it. So if I just wanted to add some kind of informational entry to that displayed some information about the server, Like the uptime, for example. I could create just a completely fake player, use whatever fake skin I wanted to, set its name and latency, and add it to that.
Sounds
Now,
pretty cool.
yeah, it's really nice actually. Sheik did a great job on it. At the moment, though, you're not able to listen for when vanilla modifies it. So that happens when a player's latency changes normally, and it updates the 5 little green bars, or when a player joins or leaves and they get added or removed. However,
Right.
in the future, I'll be working to add an event for that. So if I want to, say, display a fixed list of things to a player, I can do that by canceling the event. Also, note that each tab list is per player, so I can give 2 players 2 completely different tab lists without them interfering with each other.
And I believe that the tab list API needed to be modified so that eventually contextual data can use it, because from what I understand, for example, an example of contextual data is going to be vanish, where you can make a specific player vanish for another player, but not vanish for other players. And the way that works is the tab list for that other player needs to be updated specifically. And this is most all in prep for contextual data.
That's right. So in the future, if I make someone invisible to, like say, to just myself, I would have the option of that automatically keeping it out of the tab list. Though of course you'd be able to disable that, or otherwise add it back in manually, if you did want them in the tab list for whatever reason.
Thanks. And up next is the asset management that Wendy added. I believe this was a really kick-ass feature that a lot of people have liked so far.
Right. So the asset manager, the implementation is actually rather simple. Essentially, this now allows you to specify a directory in your plugin where you store assets. This directory defaults to the Minecraft asset directory, so that's assets, then the plugin domain. So what you can do now is between plugins or in your own plugin, if you have a plugin container object, you can just call get asset, and then you specify the name of the asset, and it'll give you an optional asset object, and if the asset was found, it'll contain your asset, which is basically a wrapper for a URL. And there's a couple helper functions in there as well, like copy to file or read string or read bytes. So basically it just eliminates a lot of boilerplate you would previously have in your plugins, such as like default configuration files. It pretty much boils loading those down into one line instead of having to mess around with resources and class loaders and whatnot.
And
Awesome.
another big unsung feature of this system is this will really make a difference once we start doing a lot more stuff on the client in SpongeForge. Whereas right now the default system in the clients use something called resource location, and the asset manager is a big step towards providing that system to plugins, but not making it immediately clear that's what it is behind the scenes. And I plan to use it in my own kind of hybrid plugin that I use on the Almura server called Almura. I plan to completely replace the usage of resource location and such and purely use the asset manager, because it is a far easier system to use, and I don't have to fight with my development environment to get it to read the assets the way it's supposed to. So it's really nice.
And up next is the pagination API changes from Aaron.
So for a while, Sponge has had a pagination API, which was written by ZML, who is here right now. However, there were some changes that needed to be made to make it more usable and to fix some issues, which were breaking. So one of these is the removal of pagination calculators. They were sort of an implementation detail of the service itself, and they were never implemented properly to begin with. So, they previously allowed the service or a plugin to choose the maximum number of lines per page. Since they've been removed, that's now a part of the pagination list itself. And additionally, instead of just a plain pagination builder, you can also actually build it to an immutable pagination list, which you could pass around or store if you wanted to. And if you're not familiar with the pagination API, by the way, it essentially is a really easy way to display any kind of data which takes up multiple pages. So what it does, or the default service implementation at least, it'll split up the data into pages based on the maximum number of lines per page, usually about 20, and then put arrows in chat, which are actually clickable links. You can click those arrows to move back and forth between the pages, which work by running a command on the server. So if you're a plugin author and you've ever wanted to do something like your own help command or any kind of information which is too long to put in chat normally, you can use the pagination API to make it really easy to display that nicely.
Cool. And you also cleaned up the economy account creation.
That's right. So we've had an economy API for a while, which was sort of unlike the other APIs in that it's not an actual vanilla game mechanic. So permissions technically isn't, or rather pagination technically isn't either, but that's more of a utility than anything that we've added. So, well, things like permissions do have some kind of vanilla component, which is op levels in vanilla. Economy service is a completely plugin added thing. The reason we added it was to just allow sort of a common API for plugins to work off of without having to depend on some external economy plugin or API. So with the changes I've made, I've just made it easier for plugins to get access to an account. So there's now just two methods, hasAccount and getOrCreateAccount. So in the normal case, a plugin will just use getOrCreateAccount if they want to get, say, a particular player's account on the server, which, as the name suggests, creates it as necessary. So previously there was getAccount and createAccount, but there's now just one method, which makes it simpler for plugins to get an account to make transactions with.
Awesome. And next is a feature that I'm particularly caring about is item stack generation and trade offer generation. This was something that has been spoken about in the past. If it'll be under trade offer, whoever's controlling that one.
Sorry, do you want to do it? Have you got it? Yeah.
Yeah, let's see. So currently, to create item stacks, you have to do a lot of your own legwork to just generate some sense of randomness, using a lot of your own randoms, using a lot of your own pools of enchantments, data, and it's not fairly easy to do. But what I've added is an item stack generator that quite literally takes a bunch of what's called buy consumers that apply various modifications to an item stack builder, and it's supplied a random. This is usually because randoms are provided with almost every single entity, world, and server. So the use of it, rather, is simple. And this class that I'm scrolling over right now is item stack generator populators. It is fully usable with easy to use methods for providing randomization with keys, with keyed data. So for example, if you want to randomize item dies, you can provide the key and a list of die color variants. And this is the overall example So first off, we have it is very stateful in terms of the order that it has to go in, because the item type has to be defined first to ensure that the data values are possible to add. The quantity can be custom defined. This also uses a little bit of the variance and quote-unquote looting API that Daemon wrote up for the populator API back before 3.0. See, right here we have list values for a single variant of banner patterns, if we wanted to, if it was possible. And here we have an enchantment with vanilla level variance, where it selects a random value between 1 and maybe 3 of these possible enchantments, and it applies a variant of their natural levels. So if sharpness can go from sharpness 1 to sharpness 5, it'll choose a random one of those levels. This singleton key value will define a single value, so it will be guaranteed to apply, and the unbreakable, etc. And then the item stack generator is built. And the item stack is never actually built until the generator is called upon. And that's the uniqueness of it. To expand with trade offers, it uses item stack generators to generate the first, the second, and the selling item, and provide some extra things like the experience chance, the starting uses, max uses, and then generates the trade offer. And this also adds a villager registry to expose the trade offer list mutators that are present in API, in vanilla, and in modded environments, where a career at a specific level has various trade offer mutators that get applied. And the uniqueness of it is that since it's exposed in the API, you can, as a plugin, you can completely modify the provided career list mutators. And vanilla villagers, well, actually villagers in general, will use the villager registry to get their trade offer generations. Next is changing out colored blocks to use dyeable data. Previously, they were using colored data erroneously. Unfortunately, I didn't catch it in time before the 3.0 release, but it's been corrected for 4.
To expand on that a little, previously certain blocks that had a dye color associated with them, like carpets, stained glass, and stained clay, were incorrectly using the colored data, which would still work, but it was much more difficult than it needed to be. So with 4.0, you'll be able to use the dyeable data for any kind of block that is a color, which I believe are wool, stained clay, glass, glass pane, and carpet. So thanks to the power of the data API, you can use the same type of data, or key, to change the color of those, even though they're all completely different blocks.
Thanks for the addition. Next is something that I've been working on for a little over 2 months, is spawn causes. They have been introduced to the API when they were originally written in November. However, they were not implementable as they were, and they weren't extendable. Most importantly, they weren't extendable by plugins. And this change creates not only the spawn causes, but also an abstract. There is an abstract spawn cause that plugins can extend, and likely their builders. the same treatment has been applied for healing sources for the healing entity event API. And I think that wraps up all of the changes and additions that have been made for 4.0.
If it's possible that we've missed something, which it is quite possible, then you guys will be able to find out just by using 4.0 in itself. We do apologize for being a bit long-winded about that, but that just goes to show the gravity of the changes that we've made in, what, 3 months?
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah, and pretty much 3 months. Oh, 2 months. That's right. Yeah, 2 months. The gravity of changes that we've made to the API, as well as we're keeping to our promise that we're not going to get complacent. If things need to get fixed, I mean, obviously we've broken things in bleeding, which is what 4.0 is called right now. And if there's changes past 4.0 into the next one, which would be 5.0, that don't make sense or need to be broken, we will continue to do so. It is never our goal to let the API sit and basically to start smelling, which is kind of a word that we use for when the API is it's in maintenance mode. It's not receiving any good changes, and it's just made to work just because, not to break plugins. It's kind of a methodology as well as a mindset difference between our project and other projects that are alike to this one. But that pretty much covers the API update. We're going to go full swing into talking a little bit about the implementation, and we promise it won't nearly be as long-winded as this was. The first one, which is the biggest implementation change that's been made besides just general bug fixing and implementation details, is going to be the changes made to cause tracking, a system in which Blood came up with and had worked on for several months, and now Gabazo has been basically redoing it / polishing it, and I'll let Gabazo talk about it.
So, thank you. So originally cause tracking was made to work, to kind of borrow some words from Chris. It was made to work primarily to just track everything that's going on in the server. If an entity is ticking and it sneezes and 500 blocks explode, then it'll know about it. If a tile entity like a quarry is ticking and it's chewing up blocks, the cause tracker will know about it. And likewise, most importantly, if a player places a block like a bed block, which actually is 2 block placements, cause tracker will know about it. And the unfortunate part of it is that it was written in a way that it could not be it was rather brittle in that adding any extra features would require some serious plumbing. And so some of that plumbing is just in this complete rewrite, so to speak, where cause tracker is no longer actually a cause tracker, but more of a context tracker. And what happens is during various events like ticking an entity, ticking a block, etc., we enter in what's called phases. And with each phase, there's a phase context. Adam, if you want to find a phase or the context tracker in the branch.
I shall have a look.
And each phase has a respective phase context to associate the information that's being passed along from the server for that specific phase. So if a player is sending a packet like an inventory click packet, the cause tracker will provide the context of the player, the packet, the container that is being used, the item stack cursor that is being used, and various information from the packet itself. And phase context acts very much like a cause, where it uses named causes to keep track of not having to use just classes, but also using named objects. And in general, when you enter a phase, it's very well possible that that phase enters several other phases, so nested phases. And at the end of each phase or process, that phase is unwound, and the phase uses the context to throw any extra methods, any extra events that need to be thrown for plugins to listen to, or if it's needs to capture entities that are spawning because death drops, then it will do so. And this goes hand in hand with our bulk events. As some people may know already, the spawn entity event is a bulk event where multiple entities do spawn. And what happens there is we actively buffer what entities are being spawned until that phase is completed, and when that phase is completed, all the entities are gathered in a list, thrown out into an event, and plugins can manipulate the list however they please. And at the end of it, the entities that are remaining in the list are actually spawned in. And in general, this will also keep in line where each world has its own context tracker. So in the unlikely event that someone decides that worlds can become multi-threaded, it's very simple for the context tracker to be aware of that thread. Also, it's just it's a kind of a God branch, because at the moment it's replacing almost all the logic to throw any of our events do with any interaction in the world. So it has to be robust and it has to be fast, and we're doing it in a way that is going to satisfy those two requirements.
Yeah, and if I may, Gabzu.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I just wanted to add one thing about this. For those of you who may not be that familiar with the cause tracking system, this is what provides sort of all the logic that goes into the cause object you get in an event. So this is what allows you to do things like querying for a particular object in an event's cause and have it actually be there. So all that extra information you get there that might not have been available with other plugin or mod systems, this is what cause tracking is responsible for powering.
Also, one last thing to add. As some developers may know, we've been adding a few methods, specifically like set block or open and close inventory, that take a cause. This is because the way the context tracker works, the context tracker knows that when a cause is provided from a plugin, as long as a plugin instance is provided, it will associate only with that cause, and any of the current phases that are taking place will not be tracked or erroneously. So if a plugin is using a synced task to place 500,000 blocks, and there are players running around placing blocks, changing blocks, etc., or TNT goes off, it won't erroneously associate those blocks as being changed. We've done some preliminary testing with Voxel Sniper, and it was able to replace 800,000 blocks with minimal issue and minimal memory usage. Though I do have to say, phrase that Voxel Sniper already has its own, not ticked, but what is it? Kind of like async world edit did for world edit. It performs the changes in batches so as to not slow down the server or overload clients who will just utterly crash from 800,000 blocks being changed. And that's about it.
Yeah, I mean, there's not really too much more to say about the implementation. It's just a matter of making things work where you expect them to. As things get fully implemented, we will start taking a bit more of a stronger look at doing some other performance patches for the server. Some of the stuff that iCar has done over in his own projects that Spigot uses, and a couple of other patches from a variety of people that have been in this community for a while, we do hope to pull into the Sponge core. where it be a mix-in plugin, which you can turn off and on for your server, or just within the server itself if it's not a gameplay breaking change. That's something that we are definitely starting to take a look at now that things are starting to work where we want them to work. The biggest performance change, though, was to work on the cost tracking system and get it to be as performant as we can. It's a really fine balance between having functionality or being able to expose all this information that plugins have ever wanted, but at the same time making sure that it doesn't cause it to be unrealistic for you to have really, really big servers, with 100 to 200 or maybe up to 300 players and not be able to do anything on the server. The one thing, though, that's been helping us is they have been striving to make good performance changes to the base game. 1.8 did cause some performance degradation, especially in the earlier versions of it. As it got to 1.8.9, they had covered a decent bit of it, though World Generation still suffered quite a bit. With 1.9 coming out, 1.9 is already out, the performance changes they made to World Generation have done quite a bit for the game. I've tested with it a bit, and it's a lot better than what it used to be. They definitely have some way to go in a lot of areas, but that in itself, with them doing their part, and when I say them, I mean Mojang. With Mojang doing their part to the base game, that makes our lives a lot easier because we're not having to work on trying to make that stuff perform better. They're working to make vanilla perform better, which benefits all projects, not just us. But that's pretty much it for the implementation. We're still pushing out regular builds to SpongeForge and Sponge Vanilla. It is our goal to try to get down a recommended build, perhaps once every 2 weeks. If we can do even better, we'd love to do once a week. But obviously, this project is not a full-time job, though it certainly feels like it for some of us. So we can only do so when we have the opportunity. It is our goal, though, to get it at once every 2 weeks. And I know we just pushed out a recommended build. What was that build number, Gabe?
I believe 1175.
Okay, and that was for SpongeForge. Sponge Vanilla doesn't have the same build count because SpongeForge has received more edits to it than Vanilla has. Though I do want to stress to people that, and we've said this numerous times before, but I feel it does need to be reiterated, SpongeCommon exists as the parent to both Sponge Vanilla and SpongeForge. SpongeCommon contains about
100,000
90%.
lines.
Yeah, it's quite a bit of code. It's about 90% of the project exists in that repo. So what as SpongeForge is really 90% SpongeCommon, and then a few mix-ins and a few edits here and there to make it run on the Forge platform. Sponge Vanilla falls under the same system. It is SpongeCommon 90%, and then a few edits to make it work on vanilla Minecraft without mods. So even though SpongeForge is the flagship, it is. We've never changed that. That does not mean that Sponge Vanilla doesn't receive any care, any love, whatever you put X, Y word here, because it does. But 9 out of 10 times, you don't see it on the repo itself. You have to go to SpongeCommon to understand what's going on. This project is very unique. There's not really another project that's set up this way. For instance, if you look at Spigot, they have one server, one API. If you look at Old Bucket, they had one server, one API. For us, we have one server, one mod, one API, one shared platform to where plugins can run on both. In the future, the big difference between the two will be when Sponge adds a client-side API portion to it, then that client-side API will work on the Forge side because it will use the Forge loader to make all that possible. The client-side API would not function on the vanilla side. It is not our intention to bring Sponge Vanilla to the client. I just wanted to take some time to reiterate and to bring that point home, that there's really not that big of a difference between the two of them. It just comes down to what you want to use for your server. So that pretty much covers the implementation. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to add some. From Sponge Community Server, we've actually been bombarding both Sponge Vanilla and Sponge Forge with so many plugins, and in fact, today on the main demo server is actually running Sponge Vanilla. We have the Forge modded server to check for compatibility with mods, but generally speaking, we have tried very hard to make sure that all plugins would work equally on Vanilla and Forge.
Oh, and very
In
nice.
our tests, Vanilla has actually had much faster startup times because it doesn't have the entire Forge backend to load in as well. An average Forge server startup would usually take about 2 minutes, and a Vanilla server startup would take anywhere from 20-30 seconds. Last time I checked. Plugins may take longer to load, as you would expect, but for most people, Vanilla might actually be more appropriate because it's more lightweight.
Absolutely.
And that was always the intention of Vanilla, to be the lightweight feature, like still feature equivalent level, but far more lightweight than Sponge Forge can ever be, simply by
Stable
nature.
as hell, too.
So we're going to move on a little bit here and start talking about for Sponge Docs. So
Yeah.
you just piped up, Inscrutable, so I'm going to turn it over to you and let you talk just a little bit about it and do your shout out.
Hey everyone. Well, I've noticed the Sponge Docs are getting a fair bit of love lately and getting read quite a bit too, from what I hear. We're still working on the problem of multiple API versions because we want to be able to support more than just the current version. Now we've decided to more or less abandon having a static build for the 3.0.0 because it's really not even getting any updates or anything. And to be honest, it's safer for everyone to update to the 1.8.9 builds anyway. But 3.1.0 should have its own static build and translations, and we should still be able to proceed with doing 4.0.0 and possibly even 5 too when we get there, and have it all simultaneous. Now that's currently in progress, it's in development. We haven't quite get it all working yet, but we're hoping to be able to do so sometime soon. That's when we actually bump to 4.0 anyway. Another recent development is we actually have a big table of Bucket to Sponge API analogs. So people can sort of see, what the methods were in Bucket and what they are in Sponge and vice versa, so they can actually help make the change from Bucket plugins to Sponge plugins. Now, obviously, it's not going to be complete. There are still sections of the API under development, but it's certainly an important document to have handy, and that's now live on the docs, thankfully. Well, live in the sense that we've actually offloaded the actual document off somewhere else, so you could download that separately.
The link is in the Twitch chat if you want to see that.
Yeah, let's
Thanks,
bring it
guys.
up in the stream.
Anyway, that's
up.
one thing that people have been asking for quite a while and has been in development for some weeks, many weeks, with a lot of contributions to try and make sure it's as good as we can make it anyway. I'm sure that'll get more development as we get to further developments in the Sponge API. Further things that are being developed are the theme for the docs too, including the top bar, which is currently being developed and changed. TZK is doing some work on it. We're hoping to have something that's a bit more consistent with the rest of the Sponge sites sometime soon, including some handy links at the top and so forth. I think there's even a preview on the doc somewhere on the repo. Another thing I'm going to call out for is, of course, the usual, we want more people to write more docs. I'm still hoping to get some docs for the permissions API, which now has a bit of demand, and also some nice ones on the scoreboard would be great sometime. There's a couple of people who have been assigned to that issue. Remember that from long in the ancient history? There's about 3 issues now that are actually about a year old, which is it's starting to gather a little bit of dust, so we need to try and get some of these moved out and shipped. And then there's a final step that I've just added to the notes here that apparently 12 Awesome Man is going to be preparing the docs for the 4.0.0 release. So congratulations.
You're just gonna give him the shovel and let him dig, huh?
Absolutely. Someone's got to start.
So
Big
moving
holes
on-
always start with a little one.
So moving on a little bit here, we're going to talk about the web update a little bit with OR, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it. For those of you that have asked about OR numerous times, OR basically only really has 2 people in its history that have worked on it. Those two were Luke GB and Gradamax. Luke is generally busy with his IRL endeavors, as well as he does do the sysops for us. The other one is Gradamax, and Gradamax, unfortunately, is pretty much missing in action due to basically being in school and having to work, and I do definitely wish him the best. So at this point with OR, obviously we do have the shout out about trying to find a group of people to work on the project, as well as Wendy has actually been working on it a bit. He has been trying to get OR up and running in a framework called Play, which is a Java kind of web framework. I think he's doing it with he's doing it with Scala, that's right. And he's had a lot of good luck with it. Basically, at this point, we're just looking for people in the community that are passionate to do web development, be it in the current implementation, which uses Python, or be it with helping Wendy with his Play framework port. We're not entirely sure which way we're going to go forward with it as far as where the language is concerned. We're basically looking to get an idea about which one is going to be the one that's going to be the most easily maintainable one, and for people to be able to assist us with it. Because ultimately we want to write it in the language in which we can find people that can help us out the most with it. And at this point, that's kind of what we've been reaching out to people, see who'd be interested. So if you are a web developer and you're looking at something to chew up your free time, looking to contribute to a good cause, then I would certainly ask you to give OR a look and see if something that you want to help us out with. And obviously you can join our IRC channels, Sponge and then Sponge Dev on IRC on Espernet, and then talk with us about your experience and perhaps submit a PR or two our way. And if everything pans out, then we'd be more than happy to give you access to the repo and start submitting some good work to it.
I have also linked the Play implementation in the Twitch chat. Pretty much almost all of the templates have been ported from Django, and now I'm just working on some functionality. I have reading meta files is working now, so that's kind of cool. So you can just upload a file and it'll take all the info from the meta file and automatically fill in your plugin details for you.
Yeah, that's also working in Python land as well these days. Though I don't think that's actually live yet. That's still sitting on my PC, waiting to see the light of day. I think Wendy and I have some work to do just to talk to each other and figure out what we're going to be up to in terms of getting the API consistent between the two, so that if we write JavaScript and front-end stuff, it works on both, and so we don't end up with two inconsistent data models that make everything really hard later on.
Right.
So that's basically it where OR is concerned. So we're going to move on a little bit now, and I'm going to give Owen a few minutes to talk about the Sponge plugin competition and basically the details of it and when the deadline is.
Okay, so you might have seen in our recent status updates that we're also running the Sponge plugin competition. This is the second time round. Grinch is the one organising all of this, but he's out today, so I'll take over and discuss it. Essentially, what we're looking for is people to make plugins that haven't been seen before on Sponge. So that's brand new plugins ported over from like a Bucket ecosystem, a Forge ecosystem, just built using the Sponge API. Though we do also allow you to use net.minecraft.server. So in general, our rules for the competition are that the plugin must be your own code. It must use Sponge API with NMS allowed. It has to be in Java. Sadly, I don't believe we're allowing Scala, Kotlin,
No.
etc.
Nope.
Which, yeah, that's just a limitation for this one. We may be liable to change that in future competitions. So it has to be a new plugin, a plugin that's no more than a month old, or maybe one that you've written a while back but hasn't really taken off. So if you've got a very small user base and it's not widely known, we do accept that. Or a plugin that's a port from another project, such as Forge, Bucket, Canary. Now, the plugin must be compatible with SpongeAPI by a submission deadline, so you're able to submit the project before then, but you need to have it obviously working on SpongeAPI before we can actually try and hand out prizes. If it doesn't work, I'm sorry to say we won't be giving you the prize. Now, we are only allowing one submission per person. If you've got more than one submission, we'll only use the last submission you've given us, so the most up-to-date one. And also, as a result of several legal issues, we've decided that either you must be 17 and above to enter the competition, or you need signed approval from your parental guardian. That's just due to the nature of the prizes. So I'll just talk about that also. We'll be giving you an item from a list of games we have. We're not going to show that just at the moment. But if you win, we will show you the list of games and you get to pick one game out from that entire list, whichever you like. Then the runner-up will also have the ability to choose one of the games remaining on the list. So, the entry deadline for this is March 19th at 12 p.m. UTC minus 6, so that's going to translate to 6 a.m. on March 20th for anyone using just UTC. And we'll be reviewing and right after the submission deadline's closed, and we'll put out a winner announcement on the 21st. So we'll probably also announce that either through just a pure forums announcement, or we'll include it as part of a status update. So I'll just, have we linked it all? Yeah. So all the details of what you need to do are listed on that page. And just go ahead, submit all the submit whatever plugin you think gives you the best chance at winning the competition. We'd love to see a whole bunch of awesome new stuff being developed. I mean, it can be a brand new take on whatever you want. There's so many options opened up by the Sponge API that just haven't been accessible before. So go out there, do whatever you think is awesome, and honestly, even if you don't win the competition, it's great to get involved because it just helps flesh out the whole platform of Sponge. I mean, you might not win the competition, but it might turn out that your plugin becomes incredibly popular.
Right.
So yeah, just get involved. Have a go.
All right, and that pretty much covers the plugin competition. So moving on some now, we had next up about the community server, but I'm going to put that to last before we open up the Q&A. The first one would be talking about some of the forums improvement, which is, I'll let Owen talk a little bit about that as well.
Okay, well, some of you might have noticed now on all the sort of category or latest pages, we've now added in a bunch of links to all the major sort of sites for the Sponge project. So we've now got links to the Sponge docs, our GitHub with all the code stored on it, our IRC channels, the downloads link, and an About Us link. So this is all designed both to make it really easy for people new to the whole Sponge ecosystem to come in and have easy access to basically the entire platform, and also to just improve the usability slightly for those of you who are already well aware of the entire platform. we are like, if people have feedback on the forums, look. If you think that we'd be better off putting different links there, or if you're encountering issues on any browsers, we'd really like feedback on it. Just let us know what you think. Let us know if there are better ways to do it, because we're always open to new ideas. And I think that basically sums up for the forums changes.
Yep. So now
the
we're
only,
going to...
Yep. I was just going to say the only other thing we've got is the main page itself. If you're a developer and you're interested in helping us out with the main page, just contact us via any of the methods mentioned by Jiden earlier when he was talking about OR.
Absolutely. So moving on to our last entry for today before we move on to Q&A is the Sponge community server. So this week we actually talked to a few folks from the Resident Rise people. Yes, I'm aware I said hosts earlier. Shoot me. I don't know why I said it. So we have some folks from Resident Rise, and they have decided to help us out with the community server as well as working on a mod pack for us. And we have a few folks from there today, and I will let Ryan take over from their team, and he'll kind of introduce themselves and talk a little bit about what they do as well as what they would hopefully help us with.
Thank you. So I'm Ryan. I'm one of the developers, one of the 4 active. I'm a project lead. Then we have God Nero, who has been one of the, I would say, lead developers, who's been the most active at updating everything. Mr. Fixit, who also helps with a little bit of it. And we just had he's not here today, but we do have another new developer who we just brought on our team named MaxServe. So if you ever see him, you'll know who he is. And we also have Lance, who's in here, who's also a developer. There's one other gentleman who's not here either. I believe he's at work right now, and that's Karen Dave. But essentially what we're going to be doing here is we've been talking with Gabby and the rest of Sponge, and we're going to help Joe out by migrating the current official mod pack to ATL, or AT Launcher, that's made by Ryan Almighty, and actually make a more stable, something that's updated more regularly, and that's going to be well supported and maintaining the server a little bit better than being a one-man army. With that pack, we are looking into some testers from the Sponge or people who are interested in it as well if they want to help play test it. We're only looking probably for maybe about 5 or 10 more people, but that's really about it, and it just needs to be active people just so we can get all of our bugs and everything squashed.
That sounds pretty good. Yep.
Do you have anything, Nero, to add or fix it?
No, you covered pretty much everything. The only thing I was going to say is we're going to see what we can do about expanding the list a little bit, but still keep it within a fairly light pack as it is.
I just think currently that the Sponge pack that's running now is like 30 or 40 mods. In our private Resident Residence, since we have 143, but we don't have to hit that number.
No. Again, we want to focus on stability, so.
And that's mainly what I've accomplished so far, is just keeping it small, mods that I have been able to test, and keeping it stable. But I'm sure you guys have lots of resources at your hands, so I'm sure that pack will expand and feature lots and lots of really neat mods that people like to play with.
And that's kind of what we're hoping to go forward with this relationship with these gentlemen here, is to basically get to the point to where we can have a mod pack that is kept up to date like this. And because ultimately, when you have a mod pack, especially when you have one that has this many mods, and when we had our initial discussions with them, I was completely blown away by really the amount of mods that some people will put in a mod pack, because I don't have experience with doing day in and day out of managing a mod pack, but I know Doctor does, and for the amount of mods that he was dealing with, it was just a colossal headache. keep it stable, to do bug fixes, and it's difficult to make mods work together when the ecosystem of Forge allows them to touch the Minecraft internals basically without a filter. It is not our intention to force the Sponge API down people's throats, but there's definitely a wide appeal to using Sponge plugins, because we do go out of our way to make them very, very much compatible with each other. And to hear kind of numbers of like dealing with close to 300 mods, it's just, even to this day, I'm still blown away by that. And I am hoping that we can use their knowledge that they've gained from basically dealing with that many mods for such a long time to make the Sponge the Sponge mod pack as stable as we can possibly get it. And I'd say at this point, if we want to, we can go ahead, because I know some people have got onto the demo server, but we can go ahead and officially announce the demo server to the chat and have people join. We are running two. If you didn't catch that earlier, we do have the Sponge Forge demo server, which has like the mod pack, and people can provide a link into the chat for you to join with like the TechNet launcher and such. There's also another demo server for Sponge Vanilla, and as we mentioned earlier, that's kind of the main one on the demo server. It has a bunch of plugins, and you can join with your 1.8.9 client. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and draw the main conference to a close, because we go right into Q&A. And if anyone has got some questions and such they would like to be answered, they can go ahead and do so. Actually, I think I am forgetting something though. Let's see here. Oh yes, our one last thing. So if you've got a moment or two, Adam, why don't you go ahead and open up your 1.9 client for the stream?
Oh yeah, for sure. I was just running around in the Resonant Rise server.
Yeah, not a problem. So as some of you have been watching the chat or watching the IRC channel, you'll know that the 1.9 mappings came out on Tuesday, I believe. Something like that. So the 1.9 mappings came out on Tuesday, and ever since that point, we've been kind of going back and forth on getting SpongeCommon and Sponge Vanilla updated for Minecraft 1.9. So as you can see on the stream, there is 0.9 available. Yeah, you'll probably have to reopen it back up.
Yeah, it's gone in now. It's because I was on the Resonant Rise server.
Yep.
I just relogged. Yeah, I'm in.
Okay. So we've been updating SpongeCommon and Sponge Vanilla since Tuesday. And what you're about to see is the result of that work. Sponge Vanilla is updated for Minecraft 1.9. And he can type Sponge version, so people won't say, well, no, you're just on Vanilla and you're trying to say it's not. I mean, it is. As you can see, this is definitely Sponge Vanilla. Now, there are a couple of things that are broke at this point that I will be working on. The biggest one is I need to do some changes to make custom worlds work again. That'll probably be what I do this afternoon if I don't have something else that I have to get done around here. The second one is definitely got some weird kind of chunk rendering thing going on when we fly out and about. But you can definitely go to other worlds. This server is running from my development environment. So he can do like TP world space dim 1. That will take him to the end. And you'll see the dragon flying around. And the dragon will want to attack him if he goes out of creative mode. As you can see, she's there, and she's quite mean. There she goes. I see her on the stream now.
It's quite dark. I don't know if it's actually showing up because the dragon's basically
You'll have
black
to
on on black. Right, I'm gonna go into. This is gonna go badly for me, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're dead already.
I haven't got anything. Maybe I should just give myself a bow and arrow or something first. So at
It's
least I
not
have some
gonna
armor.
help.
It's not worth it.
It's
You
not
sure?
gonna help.
Oh, come on. At least I should have a fighting chance.
You would have a fighting chance if you
How
had
do I
my
Minecraft?
testing plugin that gives me a stick with 1,000 strength.
You'll
for
need more than
sharpness.
one arrow.
Stick of truth.
You had to
I
come
gave
back
myself
12 times
64
last time I
gave
tried.
myself 64 hours. Oh, you're behind, aren't you? Okay, right. Let's try this.
This is about to be a case of hashtag wrecked.
I'm just gonna have to run away, aren't I? Oh
You
shit!
can't
this
hit
is-
her with arrows.
What? Really?
She
Friend
just
creator.
bounces off.
Yeah.
You used to be able to.
They've
Well, that was
completely
before.
reworked
Oh,
it.
the dragon's the least of my problem. I pissed off the Endermen. Oh no, go away. Oh.
They made her lol overpowered.
I just added glowing to all entities.
The hell is that? Oh, it's an
You looked at an
Enderman
Enderman.
yeah, but
Can't
they've
shoot
got
them with
glowing
arrows,
now.
they teleport.
So you
It's
should be
gonna
able
matter,
to
man.
actually
You
see
can't
her.
hit the Enderman with arrows, Adam.
Oh,
Where
well,
did
I
she
don't
go?
know. I'm not an expert in Minecraft.
It kind of goes to
Expert in
show you.
Minecraft modding, not an expert in Minecraft.
This is a problem with modding. You end up spending all your time, modding and not actually getting to play the game. Oh
Still
god, where is
chasing
it?
you. He's behind you.
Thanks for the update from 30 seconds ago. Oh god, this is horrible. What the hell just happened? It just fired me into the. I'm dead. Well, that was.
And you can't just swing your sword a bunch anymore either, because
Right.
the damage is a lot less. Ed.
I remember watching something about that at Minecon. Oh my god, all the entities have an outline.
Yeah, I gave that to everything.
That's in
So
your
this is
glowing
definitely
potion effect,
1.9.
by the way.
Yeah.
Because that's not in 1.8, is it?
That's a weird
Yeah.
effect right there. That's really cool, actually. That's not weird. No, that's really cool. I like that.
That's from spectral arrow. Well, rather, spectral arrows give entities the glowing effect when you shoot them.
So it's like a tagging effect.
Yeah. It's another potion effect.
I mean, ultimately, I wanted to show this today, and I've shown some pictures of it working for Sponge Vanilla, but I didn't quite give an impression of its stability. It's not 100% stable right now, ultimately because we haven't had a chance to test everything. I mean, I know for sure that custom worlds are a bust, but I kind of knew that was going to happen going into this. As far as a lot of the other things, I've been pleasantly surprised by how smooth the update has went. The people that were really involved in the update, we had Minecraft helping. Aaron has been an absolute godsend. We put more hours into this update in the last few days than we would care to admit. Demon came in and helped us do the world generation changes. And we've still got a couple things left on that to resolve, and then that should be good. As far as pushing this to where dev builds can come out, it's definitely was my goal to try and have something out within a couple of weeks from MCP releasing. Since everything has gone so well, then I hope to have a dev build out sometime next week to where at least people can try it out and tell me if stuff breaks with it. I haven't really found anything besides the worlds that have really broken, but there's a lot of stuff to test. I mean, when you have a new Minecraft version to come out, there's so many things to test, and it's so hard to catch everything. And there's a lot of code that has to get revised. There is a ton of code that we had to change when this came out for 1.9. So yeah, I mean that's basically it. I wanted to just kind of let everyone see that as we did promise, we would have something out within a couple of days to show that it definitely does work. And it does. And I can see Adam is being destroyed by... Oh, there we go. Now you're doing pretty good.
I kind of gave everyone a god sword.
Something I'd also like to add for those of you who are very much interested in
turn around.
SpongeForge's update. Evidently, we can't actually update SpongeForge until Forge itself is released. However, by doing all this work on Sponge Vanilla, the process of updating to SpongeForge should be a lot faster than it would to just do SpongeForge from scratch.
That's a good point. So I just want to drive home again that, as I said earlier, SpongeCommon is about 90% of the project. With SpongeCommon being updated, then the only thing that needs to happen to have SpongeForge up and running on 1.9 is to update that code for the Forge-specific changes that have been made, which is not a big deal whatsoever. To just say it bluntly, the hardest part of the update is done. And now at this point, it's just cleaning it up, doing testing, fixing bugs that we notice with it. Oh look, somebody killed the dragon.
Yeah, it's definitely like the whole process is going to be fairly straightforward. Evidently, it's still a decent amount of effort, but the thing is, by actually having two projects, it's speeding up development rather than slowing it down. Because now we're not held back by waiting for Forge to update. Rather, we can already update Sponge Vanilla as soon as MCP's out, and that way the whole Sponge Forge update takes far, far less time.
You're gonna get yourself killed, Adam.
He really doesn't know how to play.
Don't
dead.
This is
Ender Pearls do
sad to
damage,
watch.
so...
Hey guys, sorry I'm late. Can I get the server creds?
It's as usual. Demo.spongefire.org.
Thank you. It's been forever since
But
I was in SOS, so I forgot.
with that, let's go ahead and start drawing to questions and such. And let me go ahead and draw the main conference to a close. And then we'll pick up into Q&A, and we'll run Q&A for as long as, really people have questions, but not too terribly long. And in the meantime, everyone can play on the SpongeForge server or their Sponge Vanilla server. Yeah, they can play on both of those. The 1.9 server is from my house server. So this is not public, not at this point, not until I do some more testing with it. But you will definitely see at the next State of Sponge that there'll be a 1.9 offering, hopefully on both. If Forge is not ready, then it'll definitely be on the vanilla side for people to kind of log in and mess with. So yeah, let's go ahead and draw the main conference to a close and go right into Q&A.
So if you had any questions that we didn't get to before, feel free to put them in chat again now, and we can take the time to answer them.
Though from what I can tell from the IRC's perspective, it looks like there was a big net split just a moment ago.
Yep. Espinet's gone and died again.
You've been having
one
issues.
Of the operas. I'm good friends with them.
They've been having quite a few issues this week.
Okay, Tomodding's asking, does someone know how you set not.offer an item stack in player's hotbar?
I think that's more of a question for you, Adam. Or maybe a general statement.
Well, there's a method called set, so that would be the starting point. Yeah, I mean, the general contract of offer is that it sort of does if you picked up an item. So, the idea being that if you just want to put something into an inventory and don't really care where it goes, then you would offer it. But obviously that gives you the possibility that it won't go in. So you can set it to an inventory, which will forcibly put it, but again, just put it anywhere. And if you just want to put it in a specific slot, then query for the specific slot and then set. and it will, eject anything that's there. But yeah, that's it really. That if you want to set something, then call set instead of offer.
Alpha
Hey, I do want to
MC2,
bring up something.
Alpha MC2 asks, is there a 1.9 branch of Forge in GitHub or on GitHub?
There is.
Forge has started their 1.9 update, and you can view it in a branch on their repo. We won't start up a branch ourselves of SpongeForge until basically they're at the point where you can actually run it. They're not. They've still got a ways to go. So.
But they are working hard on it, so hopefully it shouldn't take them too long.
Well, we also helped out with that. Should mention, particularly with MCP.
Yes, and we also did assist with Lex on doing a lot of the new class names of MCP, and that was not last week, but the week before.
Yep.
Yeah, that was on that Wednesday and Thursday, which would be on the.
Wasn't that last week?
No. Well, that was the week before.
It was last week.
It was on the 17th and 18th, wasn't it?
No, it was. It was on the 24th.
Oh yeah, that's right. Oh, it's just been a long last 2 weeks. Yes, so that's on the 24th and 25th when they were doing that.
But yeah, obviously, what helps them helps us. So we, took the initiative to, or rather, I think we were asked, weren't we?
No, I actually approached him and said, "Hey, what do you need for us to help you out?" And he's like, "Well," and then yeah, it went from there.
Yeah, we're always keen to help out the community.
Let's see here. Another question is Wolfazine asks, why release API 4 for MC 1.8.9? This was actually discussed between me and Gabe last night. As people that are observant may see, if you look at the API branch for 1.9, you'll see that right now it's version 5.0. I'm actually going to change that. I don't want the 1.9 branch to actually be API version at all. And basically, I'm doing this for a couple of reasons. The first and big one is it's possible that the 1.8.9 modding scene won't transition to 1.9 really quickly. And if that happens to happen, and we need to actually make some API breakages based upon feedback to 4.0, I don't want basically Minecraft 1.8.9 to be left out in the dark. So this is solely being done to ensure that I don't version lock us out of anything. Another reason why we're releasing on 1.8.9 is because of the fact that 1.9 is an API breakage. There are a couple of things that did break. I have a spreadsheet open right now with a couple of the breakages, and I can give you guys an idea about what is broken. Just a second.
If you want, I can name some off the top of my head.
Yeah, you can go ahead. I mean, there's not many breakages. There's just a few.
No, I think the biggest one for entities was passengers. In 1.8 and before, Minecraft had the notion that you can only have one passenger and one vehicle. However, 1.9 with the new boats mechanic, they allow any amount of passengers on every entity, but every entity, of course, can only have one vehicle. And to reflect that, we've had to make the minor breaking change for that accessor in the entity and the related data manipulator. What else? We had to break.
I got the list open now.
Alright, go ahead, shoot.
So he is right about the riders and passengers. The API had to be changed. Minecraft 1.9 lets you choose a sound category to play a sound to someone's client. This allows you to play like a mob sound and use the category of weather effect. Now, the category system is used to determine which volume control option. So if you look at the volume settings on 1.9, you'll see there's a lot of sliders, and I think they may have had that in 1.8, but I could be wrong.
They've had it for a while.
Okay, they did.
There's one new one of voice. Just
Gotcha.
using vanilla, but
So 1.9 as a whole added a bunch of thing to sounds in general. And this is kind of part of that system. They added a bunch of new sounds to the game, and they added a whole bunch of registries as well. There's a lot of actually good changes underneath the hood for the game, and this coincides with it. To update the API, though, we had to change how play sound is done, which is just a simple method to play a sound. It actually is not a breakage because we included what they call a default method to make sure it's not, but ultimately you'll be able to choose the category type that gets sent to the client for the playing of the sound. A couple more things that broke was the villager zombie data. In 1.8, basically a zombie was either a villager zombie or not. For 1.9, a zombie villager can be like a zombie farmer villager, a zombie blacksmith villager. It actually uses the villager type to determine how the zombie looks. And so for
the profession.
Yeah, the profession. You're right.
And it doesn't actually break. It's just more of a it's an additional option.
Well, it is a breakage in that the data manipulator and key type changed. So
yes, it went from a boolean to a type. So technically speaking, that had to be a breakage.
However, you can just keep using it. You can just offer like the default value, which I believe is farmer. So if you only care about it being a zombie or not, you can just pick whichever profession you like, or check if it's present.
Moving down the list. There is one AI task that exists within SpongeAPI. It was called Attack Living AI task in the past. That one took the AI type that it'll actually, or the living type, so player, zombie, etc., that it would actually attack. Now that task is correctly been fixed by Mojang to no longer care about the type, and SpongeAPI had to update accordingly to remove that specification, not only in that class, but as well as the AI builder too. Probably something that not too many people know about, but it's a breakage nonetheless. There was a couple of removals. Splash potion data. Splash potions are no longer just a data on a potion. They're their own item types now. So that data was removed. Suspended data is no longer relevant, so we just removed it. Somebody actually asked this in chat, and this is going to correlate with the following. They asked us about how we would handle the main hand and offhand in SpongeAPI. There will be an API change, probably maybe not today, but maybe tomorrow when I get done with the world stuff, to fix the interaction. But when it comes down to it, there'll just be a pseudo enum added to the API to determine main hand and offhand, and you can get an item stack from the player for you'll basically pass in the hand type or some, I don't know what I'll call it, but basically you'll pass in, do I want their item stack in their main hand or the offhand, and in the interact block, interact entity event, you'll be able to get which hand that the interaction came from. And that's pretty much all the changes that we would have to make for interact. The last one, actually no, that was it for our list of. Oh yeah, there's one I didn't add to this list. If you look in the API, you'll see that there's a class called Dimension, and that interface had a whole bunch of methods for setting like dimension level properties. Unfortunately, I found out during the update that those would actually break mods quite a bit. So what I've done is I've removed the setting of those properties, and those properties would actually get set elsewhere. And so that would technically be a breakage if there was a plugin that was relying on setting some property of the dimension, like trying to think of one off. Oh, like does water evaporate in this dimension? And when I say dimension, I'm talking about overworld / nether / the end. Those properties would actually be done elsewhere. They would not be done in the dimension interface. And that's actually it to the breakages. I don't think that we have found, besides the changes made to bleeding, because the workflow for 1.9 followed that we actually branched bleeding off from a commit, and then we started working on 1.9. If we would have branched 1.9 off a master with no bleeding changes, then it's very possible that we would have maybe like a small percentage, maybe not even 5% of plugins that would have broken from 1.8.9 to 1.9, which is amazing, to be honest, because that means that this is actually a rather large update to the game. It was a big content update, and we came out of it basically with hardly a percentage of plugins that would actually break. We're actually going to break more plugins by merging bleeding in as API version 4.0 than we will actually break by migrating plugins from 1.8.9 to 1.9. And I consider that to be an awesome achievement.
And this, if I could interject, if you don't mind, this sort of highlights one of the nice things about using an API as opposed to something like touching the Forge the Minecraft internals like Forge mods do. I mean, well, if you want to add things like new blocks and all the things that Forge mods do, you usually will need to touch the source, but it comes at the price of having to when you do an update like Sponge did. It takes a lot of work to update and go look at all the changes and change class names and things. Whereas the Sponge plugins, there's going to be little to no breakages to bump an entire Minecraft version.
And really, the only time that there would be a serious breakage is if Mojang changed a serious part of the game. If they started removing things, removing whole systems, then that would turn into an API breakage that we would have to pass along to the plugin developers. But I'm really, really content with how the update went, and I'm really happy that pretty much, plugin developers can breathe a sigh of relief knowing that for the most part everyone is going to come through this update with literally no changes necessary. Let me see here. So I know we talked a bit about this, so let's take a look to see if there was any more questions. 20ZINNM asked, what is holding back the implementation of custom inventories? There's actually some changes that... Oh, you want us to talk about that? Go ahead.
No, Gabriel mentioned that custom inventory should be a priority to me the other day.
Oh, yes, that is correct.
I basically hadn't even realized that was something people wanted to prioritize. So,
well, I mean, the biggest thing is when we talk about implementing that, we must realize there's actually a change that you're doing that affects more than just the inventory API.
That's right.
It affects quite a few things in how we do this implementation, which is ultimately mixing into implementers of some interface and having XY actually get implemented.
Well, it gives us access to inventories provided by mods in particular.
That's correct. And to actually do custom... Well, I mean, you can do custom inventories without that change, but to do the inventory API in its earnest beyond what we've done already, we need to have that change done with the Mixin library.
This is correct.
So it's one of those deals to where once we need to get that out of the way, and then at that point we can stop worrying about can Mixin do this functionality, and more let's just wrap up the inventory implementation and be done with it. And do keep in mind that we don't shy away from using the Minecraft source code if necessary. You can easily make a hybrid plugin that can create inventory, because when people say custom inventories, they generally mean show something like a chest to the client and put some items in it. And that's actually pretty trivial to do with the Minecraft source code. And you don't necessarily need the API to do it, though it would be nice. But as it currently stands, it is a priority for the custom inventories. At the same point, though, it is also a priority to get mixed into where it needs to be for us to actually be able to finish off the implementation the way it needs to be done.
It also has some benefits for other projects that use Mixin as well. Have expressed interest in that feature.
Absolutely. And I think I was seeing in the 1.9 update that we were actually going to need this functionality elsewhere. There's a particular interface that they use now that we would need it.
Was it? It was not the iChunk provider, but iChunk populator?
I think so.
I mean, we can work around it temporarily, but it would be immensely beneficial to just have an inject before and after, or at head at return for that, specifically for cause tracking.
Alright, so let's see here. I think everyone answered Joe Schmo's question about plugins work client-side and single-player. SpongeForge loads clients, or not loads clients, loads plugins just fine. It'll load them as single-player, and that's actually how many of us actually now test plugin code. Is we'll use SpongeForge on the client, load it up in single-player, see if it works, and we never ever leave the development environment. Unlike how typically someone would test something on like CraftBucket, you'd have to compile it, copy the jar, put it in the plugins folder, run the server, see the result. It's very, very cumbersome. With Sponge, you can easily use the debugger of your favorite development environment with the Forge client running with SpongeForge in the background and be able to debug your code.
Here's one question. Shig Galad asks, I recently tried out Minecraft 1.9 multiplayer and single player and had quite some lag problems when new chunks were loaded. Will that be a problem with Sponge too? In general, yes. So if that exists in the base game, then it's going to probably exist with Sponge unless we do something specifically to deal with it. Now, while we do add some optimizations, like the ones found in Spigot, such as entity activation, it's not likely that we'd fix a problem like that, though we could always look into it and see if there's something that could be done server side. But in general, if there's some kind of problem that exists in vanilla like that, it's not very likely that Sponge will fix it.
It really depends upon the problem. If there's a serious loading issue like that, then it's very possible that if we do try and fix it, then it would have to become a Mixin plugin, and it would involve a heavy edit to the base game's code. And ultimately, people have to realize 1.9 just came out. It's not even a week old yet. And I'm fairly sure that they're getting telemetry back from the update, and they know that there's problems. But what's interesting to me is that I really haven't seen any like chunk loading slowness issues. I thought the game actually worked pretty well on 1.9. So I'm not really sure if that's just the person or something else that's going on.
And then there's a question for you, Jiden, about the client API still on the roadmap. Could you elaborate on that some more?
It definitely still is. When 1.9 came out, that was a priority for me to get involved in that update and get it to where it needs to be really quick, just to show people that there's not going to be a repeat like what happened back with SpongeForge and going from 1.8 to 1.8.9 and how vanilla was basically held back that whole time. This time, that definitely did not happen. Everything seems to be great, and we were able to update quickly. So now I will focus on getting the update, some of the things, mechanics of the update fixed, which I mentioned earlier. And then we've got some stuff to do on the current release of Sponge itself. There's some things that need to be implemented and bugs fixed. And then I'll probably start taking a serious look on doing stuff with the client. But it's still on the roadmap. I've definitely not changed my mind about doing something with it.
A question is from 20 Zinem. Is Mixin destined to be a legitimate library used by Fortune 500 companies?
It already
is. It already
Oh, wait,
is.
it already is?
Joking.
Question: will Sponge API ever support regions or schematic-style libraries allowing to replicate regions? The person who could best answer that is Demon. However, he's not with us today. It is planned. It was planned initially for 4.0, but a few things had to take priority. Where schematics will be supported in the API fully. It goes hand in hand with the data format API, and schematics will not only be exposed in the API, but a new schematic format will be hopefully provided and encouraged to use, as it will support not only the 1.8 additions of block states, but also various things like proper tile entity NBT support. The other thing that is related to schematics is structure support, as schematics do tend to include structures, and being able to create structures based on a schematic is going to hopefully be added, as that was something that Mojang did for the 1.9 update in generating the structures for the end city.
Yeah, that is right. They do use their new system, don't they?
Yeah, and we're from what we've seen, there is something that Mojang does add to their dev client to use the new structure block that they don't distribute on the production client. However, if we are able to successfully interface with the structure API structure support in the vanilla server, more than likely Humphrey here will be making a lovely visual mod to interface with it.
Of course I will.
We've got our question here. When will context be implemented? What's holding back contextual visibility? I'm gonna let you answer that, Gabe.
Contextual visibility is waiting on contextual API in general. Currently, to really understand what contextual data really means, you have to kind of understand that data API's implementation is on a global state. So modifying a block state or an item stack is going to affect every single person that is viewing that. Setting an entity to be invisible is going to affect every player viewing that entity. It's going to affect all the underlying mechanics. For example, what's the word? Collision checks, whether entity AI can look at an invisible player, etc.
User in your channel
And the
timed out.
problem with that is, with contextual data, it comes down to being able to calculate who and what is able to, for example, view an invisible player without sacrificing performance. And the API is currently written up by Kashik. However, he's recently told me that he's considering handing off the implementation
User
to
joined your channel.
either myself or someone else who can finish it. Because as with most of us can agree, writing an API is all nice and grand, but until you actually implement the API, then you notice there are some changes that need to be made. And ideally, I'd like to merge contextual API alongside with a working implement. With regards to invisibility, it's going to be a little interesting because of the context calculations that have to take place, and also so that some decision making on communicating back and forth between the global state and the contextualized state for a specific context viewer. After cause tracking is finished, I do plan to focus on contextual data completion. But I'm not going to give any sort of ETA on that.
Hey, I wanted to bring up something. So you were talking about the cause tracking and how that's getting an overhaul.
Mm-hmm.
Well, with Sponge, the whole cause tracking is something that nobody's ever seen before. Again, a mob could sneeze and blow something up and cause tracking would know about it. But my question is, how much of a hit is that on performance?
The performance hit is rather minimal. The way that it's being implemented. I mean, Adam and I have been talking about it for the last 3 weeks, right, or something.
Seems like longer.
It feels like longer, mostly because we would spend hours and hours just focusing on one singular aspect of cause tracking. The uniqueness of it is that the way that it's being implemented is it's acting as a middleman before and after certain things are being done. So setting a block state, changing a block state, throwing notification events for other blocks, performing on-place logic for item stacks, spawning entities, etc., or even changing inventories. And what ends up happening is those changes are kept in a buffer for each phase's context. And the phase context after that phase is marked as completed, or quote-unquote unwound, the context is gathered for all the changes, and the changes are thrown in an event, and then post-event it's actually completed. So the performance impact is rather minimal. The only performance impact that could realistically exist is if you have a plugin that has implemented some sort of region calculation algorithm that is just absolutely horrendous. That it decides to check every single block position for every single block transaction for every single event. In that case, it would be very expensive for plugins, but it wouldn't be the implementation's fault in this case. I see a question from Wolfzine. Why is ZG in your name?
I told him to email Square Enix. Question answered.
There you go. Repeated question from 20 Zinem. Will context be implemented with... Oh, that was already answered? Sorry.
Yes.
How can I get the game profile manager? I'm sure that if you pull it up in your IDE, you can search for methods that return that type of value.
In which it's in the server object.
Right. Another question is, what does Bycraft's sponsorship part bring to Sponge? Does it add any further legitimacy to Sponge as a platform? I'll leave that to Doctor, actually.
Doctor's busy on
other
duties. Basically, Sponge is already a legitimate platform. If we weren't a legitimate platform, we would not have survived for, 1.5 years now? Basically, all it is, Bycraft sponsoring us and Bycraft developing a plugin are two sort of somewhat separate events. I mean, anyone is free to build a plugin. We've already had some people attempt unofficial builds of Bycraft plugins. So that's just people wanting to make use of an external service and just the features that offers. Basically, their sponsorship just indicates that, like as with any sponsors, that they believe in us as a project, and evidently they think it'll be useful for them in the long run. So, same with multiplayer, same with Creeper Host, same Beast Node, etc. So
It
these are
just
all
comes down to
organizations that just believe in what we can do.
it just comes down to it comes down to business. I mean, they are a business. You know, obviously they don't do things for free, and we are another platform that they can take advantage of to generate revenue. I mean, that's really all it is. They have an investment in us to get the product to where they need it to be, and in the long run, the investment will pay off. I mean, there's not really an agenda here, if that's really the question. It's just business. So the next question was from Amaranth. Can I use Mixin to make everything wall clock based instead of tick based? When you get that branch up, I'm going to subscribe to it, because that's going to be an interesting branch to watch.
If I am understanding wall clock based, where 50 milliseconds is the prescribed difference between each tick, and the next, and it will jump tick. Is that the phrase that they use? Am I correct in understanding this, Chris?
I believe so, if that's what I'm understanding that he's getting at.
Hey.
Oh, hey.
Yeah, he's here.
No, I mean it was kind of a joke, but in Craft Bucket we had like furnaces would take the same amount of time, and like no matter how laggy the server was, for example. So
I see.
Oh, okay.
Is Mixin a thing that can do hacks like that, or
Yeah.
would I actually have to like modify the code?
It's very well easy to actually write a Mixin plugin to make it a toggle. Not only for furnaces, but also for other tile entities, where they can kind of just react based on the time difference of the last tick, or when it first started, and say, oh, by this millisecond or nanosecond, it needs to have completed. And when I say a Mixin plugin, I say that because Mixin plugins are kind of a neat way to toggle entire feature sets on or off, where the that particular set of code that changes that functionality is not even applied at runtime if the configuration deems it so. But yeah, that's very well possible.
Actually, how viable is it for a user to write a Mixin plugin?
Define a user.
Or any plugin dev, sorry.
Any plugin dev can write one. It's actually quite easy, because Mumphrey has been adding. Well, he created something called Mixin Gradle that makes using Mixins much easier. And also, we've had the addition of Sponge Gradle that adds some implementation capabilities. But in general, Mixin plugins can only be used from plugins if they are in a Forge environment, because Forge is the only platform currently that supports core mods. Sponge Vanilla does not yet support such type of things.
I was going to add, basically, a regular plugin can't use a Mixin. It would have to be a core mod.
It is
technically, you could use them in vanilla if you wrote it as a tweaker.
Yes, it is our intention to sometime this year, probably in the later part of the year, to add support to Sponge Vanilla to support loading of a tweaker ahead of time. So the tweaker would set up the Mixin core plugin, and then you would be able to do a mixin as a plugin. This is going to be very, very important for really large servers that would use the mixin's capabilities to make their gameplay breaking changes to generate more performance for the server. If the server doesn't give a flip about some things not working as they used to work, as they typically work in vanilla. I know some servers would love to like completely neutralize like a hopper or something like that.
Or particularly if it's like a mini-game server or something and they just want to turn off, flat out turn off a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah, you would be able to do that with a mixed-in plugin with not an issue. And it is definitely the objective to support that, and I think that would be a huge selling feature for Sponge Vanilla.
Well, undoubtedly, it basically means that servers are able to customize performance options to their liking. So no longer having to deal with either a one-size-fits-all or a whole bunch of specific custom builds for different server types. With mixing plugins, you're able to just have the one server jar and turn on or turn off the features that you do or don't want. I mean, from that perspective, it's quite revolutionary.
Well, revolutionary kind of. I mean, plugins have had plugins have been modularized in the past, but
not
never have been. Right, never has the server mods been modularized to the extent that this is going to. One example right now is Entity Activation Range is a mix-in plugin. So if, for example, certain Forge mods, they kind of break it because they forget to actually register their entities. And entity activation kind of bricks itself and throws an exception when an entity is trying to tick because it can't find the entity type. But, for example, an activation range can be completely disabled in that context, and the server will just act as though it's the same server. I think we would want to do the next question, which is, how does Sponge compare to Bucket Spigot in terms of developers versus server owners? And he means ratio.
That's pretty much obvious. I mean, we're a much newer project, so naturally with all sort of new software projects, we are very developer heavy at the start. As more and more people start using Sponge in a production environment, then we'll switch to a more server owner heavy. The exact analog is like software users. So initially, it's very developer heavy, lots of developers making stuff for the platform. And once there's sort of enough critical mass in terms of development, then you'll see a whole bunch of server owners, software users moving over.
One thing to add is one of the things that Resonant, I don't know if I'm actually allowed to say this, but with Resonant Rise, looking to maintain the SpongeForge mod pack for the Sponge community server, it's been kind of made self-evident that with at least 1.8.9 in the future, for modpack server administrators, they'll be encouraged to look towards Sponge to be able to actually manage all the mods in a more unified fashion with Sponge API plugins.
Yeah, essentially, from 1.8 and onwards, the Sponge is going to be replacing the whole former Cauldron ecosystem, because that's still stuck on 1.7.10.
Which is going to be a godsend for us, because since we will be updating our forums here soon to Discourse, because of what you guys use, I love it.
Discourse is best.
With that being said, I mean, with having Sponge be more, I would say, Forge friendly, it'll make it a lot easier for instead of saying mod developers saying, oh, well, hey, we don't support this because you're running Cauldron, well, it'll be running Sponge, which would be something that hopefully all mod developers will make it so if it doesn't work with Sponge, obviously there is something wrong with their mod.
Yeah, and the thing is, Sponge really runs as a mod for Forge, and with the whole Forge ideology, they should not conflict. If anything, you should be able to take Sponge out and everything else would just work as it was.
To an extent.
Also,
to kind of put a not too fine point on that, Sponge isn't the run-of-the-mill mod at this point. It's far more than that, as it's kind of also managing the entire server for you in a lot of contexts. So there are certain mods that I will not name that do kind of tend to kind of show that they aren't really mod compatible in general, with or without Sponge. And those mods tend to kind of just be labeled as, oh, well, we're never going to run it on the server. We'll only provide it as a single-player mod pack.
Also, the level at which Sponge actually recognizes that it's going to be in a modded environment as far as Sponge Forge goes. We now have protection plugins like FoxGuard and hopefully soon Grief Prevention. You can actually protect against so much
modded
more than
interactions.
you could. Yeah, so much more than you could. I mean, even on Cauldron, if you were using, maybe K Cauldron with the World Guard or Grief Prevention, a lot of those modded items would still bypass that protection. But I've been working with a few of the plugin developers here with their protections, and
User joined your channel.
it's phenomenal. It's blocking anything we can throw at it so far. And that's and then you have Gabizo and them working on interaction plugins. Like he had a Thaumcraft interaction plugin that he's working on, and I think that's really going to draw in the crowd. The actual fact that your server recognizes the mods and also you can interact with the mods. That's something that's been missing all along.
Yeah, it's definitely like this. Sponge Forge is Cauldron done right. Obviously, Cauldron was a great project, but it was, in essence, a very hacky fix. It was, look, we have this amazing potential of Forge mods, and yet we also have this amazing ability of plugins to allow administrators to modify their servers. So it was basically squashing the two of them together. Whereas now with Sponge, we've got the advantage that it's a native API. Sponge is designed ground up to work with all the mods. So now you have everything Cauldron aimed to be, but without any of the limitations of squashing two different platforms together.
And I can say from firsthand experience that the Sponge team is very interested in having as much mod compatibility as possible. Any bug that I present to them, it's usually fixed in a matter of hours if it takes that long. So definitely big props and A++ to the team for addressing any issues that I have very promptly.
So we're going to go ahead and see if we can get maybe one or two more questions, and then we're probably going to draw to a close the questions and answers. If your question does not get answered today, then really you can just come on to IRC and ask us, and it's not a problem. We're not going to bite you if you decide to come ask a question. And you can join the Sponge channel or the Sponge Dev channel on Espernet. You can ask on the forums at spongepower.org.
Yeah, and remember there is a direct link to our IRC on the forums. Just click chat and it'll take you right there.
Right. So let me look here.
I actually have a question.
Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah. Given that Sponge is getting ready to hit...
or not Joe, but Ferris, I guess.
Yeah,
Wait,
Ferris.
was it Joe?
No, it's Ferris. It's
Ferris, okay.
I'm just wondering what kind of priority is there on ore? And if there's any priority on it at all, is there any kind of ETA on it whatsoever?
If we get the web developers, there's no ETA on anything in the project. But the more and more we get web developers, then the easier that will become. Let's see here.
Everyone out there who has some experience with web development, please just come and contribute whatever you can, because that's something that the project would really appreciate, any help you're willing to offer.
Let's see. 20 ZNIMMM. This is going to be our last question of the day because it's more of a spiritual question than anything else. He asked, who inspired you? And then kind of an additional or maybe an extension of the question, once the stream is over, what are you going to do? What feature is next? The only thing I will say about the inspiration process is the fact that, that's a really interesting question in itself. Probably the biggest one is, when this project first started, is I didn't like the way that the Minecraft community was heading. I mean, obviously Bucket had just waved the white flag and said that they were done for reasons that everyone knows and is not going to be reiterated. I didn't like knowing that there was that project was done. Spigot was still doing its own thing, but ultimately, I never really liked using the Spigot project. And then the communities never ever joined together, which was kind of really sad because there was an opportunity to do great things there, and that never happened. Ultimately, it was you had these people that had their sandbox, you had these other people that had their sandbox, and you never ever went and played together. And there was really no reason to why it could never have been that way. And that in itself, that kind of mindset has really driven this project to be where it is today, which is you can have your plugins, you can have your mods, and you don't have to choose. I mean, it took a while. I mean, it's taken over a year and a half investment to get to the point where we're at today. But I'm happy that we've gotten to the point to where we're now saying, you know what, whoever keeps asking you to make that choice, tell them to shove off. I'll have my plugins, I'll have my mods, and I will have my cake. And I don't have to make that decision anymore in the future. And that is what continues to drive us going forward, to finally bridge that gap that should have been bridged a long time ago. As far as features going from here, I mean, Gavizo will finish up his cost tracking stuff. Will release the 4.0 version of SpongeAPI sometime this weekend. So you'll be on the lookout for that. And there'll be a big release commit and a lot of fanfare and probably a post about it. The objectives right now, besides that, is to finish up the 1.9 update with what it needs to be, and then kind of looking ahead from there. I mean, we're always doing something. We're never ever saying, hey, we just pushed this. It's time to sit back and, look at how we're always moving to something else. The project is always fast paced. There's never a slowdown as far as, stopping working on this and just, hanging out. It's never been that way. It's always, this got done, it's time to move on to the next thing. And it's not going to be any different, and it's never been that way. So it'll be interesting. And it'll be interesting to see where we're at the next State of Sponge, especially when we show Vanilla working on 1.9 with some people joining the server and messing with it. So I would say at this point, we'll go ahead and draw the Q&A to a close. And I do want to thank everyone for sticking with us. I mean, we're at the 2 hour and 26 minute mark now, so we want to go ahead and draw it to a close so we can let people enjoy the rest of their Saturday or Sunday if it's already that for some people.
Oh, yeah.
Stop living in the past, guys.
So I want to go ahead and just draw that to a close, and we're going to draw the recording. We're not going to stop the server or anything like that, so if you're still on the server, you're still playing, then you can continue to do that. That's not an issue.
In fact, the Sponge community server will be staying up indefinitely. We've been running it continuously for a couple of State of Sponges now, so feel free to hop on anytime you want and just check it out, check out plugins, etc.
Demo.spongepower.org.
Demo.spongepower.org, and then you can go to our website at spongepower.org, and then join us in the Sponge and Sponge Dev channel in IRC. And so I would say that's the end of it. Thanks for coming out, guys, and see you later.